Welcome to Changeling Gaming. Today we're going to be talking about... As someone who has taught a great many games, both on a How to Play YouTube channel and at over 100 board game events and other game-related events across my home city of Toronto, I've developed a method for how I teach board games to get people playing and having fun as quickly and effectively as possible. In this video, I'll go over my approach and how I teach games in the internet's favorite 5-step process, for anyone who wants to improve their game teaching abilities. Before you can begin to teach a game, know that game. Ideally, understanding a game comes from having played a game, but often we find ourselves in situations where we are teaching a game to play it for the first time as well. In these cases, there are certain aspects of the game that are important to identify and understand. The first is understanding the essence of the game. Is it an engine builder, a social deduction or deception game, a deck builder, worker placement, set collection, trick-taking, cooperative, negotiation, hand management, or any other game type? There are too many to list these days. Understanding the essence of the game allows us to focus our explanation of the rules on the aspects of the game that reinforce the core of the game, and what those consistent game actions will be. Which brings us to the second aspect of the game to know. What will a player spend most of their time doing? In Splendor, they'll be collecting tokens to purchase cards. In Cockroach Poker, they'll be passing cards to other players and bluffing what they've passed. In Catan, they'll roll for resources, trade them with each other, and spend them to expand their settlements across the island. Finally, it's important to know if there are distinctly different phases to the game that should be presented individually. The classic example is Betrayal at House on the Hill, where the first half of the game involves the players exploring and getting stronger before the haunt occurs and everything changes. In Dune Imperium, there's 3 phases to the game: playing cards to place operatives and use spaces, revealing the hand to gain different benefits and purchase cards, and resolving the encounter to see whose faction comes out on top. Use this knowledge of different phases to structure the teach, breaking apart the different sections into their own explanations, with a quick statement running through the connective tissue in between. To use the examples from before, in Betrayal, the first half of the game is to make your character stronger, to survive the second half. In Dune, the placements set up the troops for the encounter, while the purchasing determines to which locations you can play in future rounds. In Stool Pigeon, you'll each be playing as the boss of the Pigeon Mafia, who've been implicated at a crime scene and need to cover your tracks as best you can to escape and throw the other Mafia bosses to the cops. But you'll need to remember what was where. This is how I start every teach of Stool Pigeon that I do. Why? Because it gets each player invested in the world of the story and gets them hyped for what is about to happen. The other piece that's being included is what the core of the game is about. In this case, an indication that this is a memory game, where the goal is to have the lowest score relative to your opponents. What I would recommend following a statement like this one with, though, would be a precise clarification of the end goal of the game. In this case, the goal of the game is to have the lowest total among the cards in front of you at the end. Here's a few more examples to give you a sense of what I mean. From a basic strategy game, to a cooperative game, to a social deception game. Because no matter the type of game, this process gets the players more involved. For our strategic resource management game, in Catan, you take on the role of settlers, arriving on a new island and developing the land to forge a new empire for yourselves. Throughout the game, you'll be trading resources and building structures to stake your claim based on the resources generated in a race to get to 10 victory points. For our cooperative game, in Forbidden Island, you play as a set of intrepid adventurers seeking to collect 4 elemental treasures before the whole island collapses beneath you and your collective goals slip out of reach. You'll be desperately trying to move about the island, preventing it from sinking, and trading to gather sets of element cards to collect the desired jewels. For our social deception game, in Coup, you play as a group of power-hungry individuals, leveraging your influence to eliminate your opponents and be the last one standing to shape a new world through your deceptive machinations as you eliminate your opponent's influence. Each of these examples sets up the fantasy of the game, gives a vibe for what the game will feel like, and introduces the core goal for the rest of the game, and often what the crux of a player's turns will look like. The inclusion of the core aspects of gameplay is useful for giving players the framework that will be fleshed out over the rest of the teach, filling in the gaps as the rest of the game is explained, but providing a through line players can connect to the rest of the rules to. Essentially, allowing players to know how the next pieces they learn connects to the goals of the game and the core of the gameplay itself. One note for cooperative games is that there are certain conditions under which players can lose the game, and it is important to cover these as a part of the goals of the game. Now that we know the game and have presented the world and goal to our players, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of what the exact options and actions will be for each player at each phase of the game. This involves going through whatever the steps are for a turn in the game and what options players will get to choose from at each of those steps. A straightforward example is Take 5, also known as 6 Nimmt, where all players choose one card from their hand simultaneously, reveal, and then a specific order decides which cards are placed where. I teach this by dealing out a number of cards face up, and then demonstrating the process by which the cards are assigned to specific rows, showing how tricks are collected and touching on how the game continues from there. A more complicated turn order would be a game like Pandemic, where first the player takes 4 actions from a list of 8 possible actions, then certain standardized game steps. I teach the game by going through each of those 8 actions the player can choose from on their turn, leveraging the player aids the game has. In a game with multiple options, like Pandemic, I usually begin with either the most common action or the actions that are key to winning. So, for Pandemic, I would begin with either the options for how to move about the board or how to take the action to find a cure. I would then proceed through the other action options one at a time, checking in with the players while teaching them. Having explained the actions and choices that the players make on their turns in the game, if there are any additional phases or portions of the game that have not been touched on yet, I then proceed to run through those phases that are essential to understanding how the game functions overall. Returning to Pandemic, this includes the phase of drawing cards, doing a rundown of what happens when an epidemic card is drawn, and then a rundown of drawing cards from the infection deck, as well as the end of game conditions. Some games don't have much of this kind of additional framework, like Catan, where all the actions a player can take after rolling the dice and generating resources is the essence of the whole game, after which play passes to the next player. Often though, many games involve a section of scoring for when the core of the game is complete, and while sometimes it is good to go through all the scoring ahead of time, sometimes it is best to give a rough summary of what is worth points at the end of the game and go through the actual values when the game comes to an end. This generally depends on how complex the end of game scoring is though. Sometimes a game is best explained by diving in and playing it. Many games in the Changeling leveling system are what we refer to as play to learn, and these games will often have aspects that are difficult to fully understand until after the game has been played, or only become clear as the game is being played. A great example of this is Race for the Galaxy, because it relies on the players to select which phases of a round will actually be played in any given round of the game. Players will have to learn how to balance the benefits that they want to enjoy and the guarantee of certain phases with maximizing their use of other players' chosen phases. It is genuinely best to just kind of dive in and experience the mechanic. Similarly, 6 Nimmt is best explained by a physical demonstration of the cards being assigned, and then just trying out the game, advocating for players to simply choose cards from their hand and slowly figure out the best way to play the game. One case to call out is where a game has 2 or more fundamentally different sections of play, where jumping into playing the game makes more sense than explaining everything up front. Blood on the Clocktower is an example of such a game, where I begin the game by teaching what each team's goals are, the events of the night phase, and how information is communicated, followed by a brief suggestion of what to do during the day phase. Then, after running the first night and half of the first day, when the players are gathered back together for the nomination and execution phase, I dive into teaching the rules for that section of the game, and what happens when players die. There is one additional aspect to consider that can be challenging, which is when to describe rules that apply only in very specific sections of the game, and the course to take here depends on the context in which you're teaching the game. If you are playing the game, then this is a much easier proposition. But I often find myself in the challenging situation of teaching games to other people at events where I will often be elsewhere when these specific situations arise. If you are teaching a game that you are also playing in, then run through rules for specific situations when it seems like those situations might occur, or the instant that they are triggered. This reduces the amount of learning that is necessary up front, while also giving players a heads up when new information to make decisions with comes into play, or is about to come into play. If you are teaching a game that you are not playing though, then I find one of two approaches tend to work, depending on the experience and understanding of the players at the table. If the players seem to have a solid grasp on all of the rules so far and have no questions or concerns, then I'll touch on those specific rules as quickly as I can without getting overwhelming. But if possible, and especially if the players are looking like they've already learned all they can, then I'll simply ask for them to begin to play and either call me back over when they have a question or when one of those situations arise that needs new rules to be covered or clarified. If you want examples of some teaches that largely follow this approach, you can check out any of the How to Play videos I've made on the How to Play channel, especially the more recent ones, because I've been improving since starting these channels, though those teaches do also tend to cover more rules than necessary for viewer reference at individual sections. You can find the link in the description and in the connected channels on the YouTube page. So remember, know the game first. Then begin your actual teach with the story of the game to get the players hooked, while explaining the core of their turns and actions first, before pulling the camera back to place those actions in context of the rest of the game, all while understanding when and where to stop teaching and start actually playing the game in question. If you find this video helpful, then you can support the work I do over on Patreon, with all of these fine folk. Alternatively, liking and sharing the videos helps as well. Thank you for watching, and remember, keep changing, keep gaming, have fun.